Alrighty, looking to see if we are live. There's always a little bit. We are live. All right. Give me 1 second, everybody. I'm going to make sure that we share this to a couple other pages before we get started here tonight as people join in. So give me a couple moments. All right, so here we are. We are live on another Monday evening, and welcome to another episode of Alive with Chris Austin, where I like to illuminate humanity and highlight some amazing people that are making a difference in the world every single day of our lives. And I'm really excited for this week's episode because not only do I have an amazing, awesome guest on with me this week, she happens to also be my sister. So it's amazing to have my sister on as a guest, and her name is Lynda Austin, and she will be our guest for this evening. And I can't wait for you all to get to know her and how amazing she is and the difference that she's making out there. So, hey, Lynda.
Hello.
So, and you'll see I'm the louder one of the two siblings. So throughout this interview tonight, you will see some similarities and probably some things to where we are different. So, I wanted to welcome everyone to be here. So the purpose of the show each week is to make sure that especially this year, there's been a lot of conversation of uncertainty and a lot of focus on negativity or what's like not working in the world. And so I was kind of getting sick of that. So I decided to make a really cool show on social media to where we highlighted some pretty cool things that are happening out there and people are making a difference. So tonight I have my sister on here, Lynda Austin, who is a behavior specialist and an educator in the Massachusetts school system. And I can't wait to ask her some questions. So anytime throughout this interview this evening, if you have any questions or comments for Lynda, or if you have anything about the topic that we're talking about, feel free to put any questions or comments in the chat, and I will make sure that I address them live. If you're rewatching this interview, go ahead and put your questions in there if you're watching it not on live, and I'll make sure I'll do my best to answer them afterwards. So it's kind of funny because I'm actually here visiting her in Massachusetts right now. So I'm actually in her basement and she's upstairs. So it's pretty funny, but it's just the way that it worked out via Zoom. So we're here tonight and looks like we have a lot of people already tuning in tonight. So it's hey Aunt Jer, hey Betsy, Lynda Reynolds, hey Jill, hey Mrs. Haber, that's my fourth grade math teacher. Hey, history, not math, I think it was social studies. Great to see you, and a bunch of people, and of course Mom is here. So so let's talk about it, right? So what would you say? So what is a behavior specialist?
Well, it's kind of a made-up job, I would say. No, no, I don't know that it's like that everyone has those. It's that we're just a really large urban district. There's probably 25,000 kids or so that we service in our district. So I specifically work mostly with kids that have been identified with special needs, but also general education students as well. So I service like teachers and students and just kind of like work on best practices, behavior management, and just like this kind of trauma informed approach to classrooms and schools.
So when you say trauma and informed, like what does that mean? Like what are some things that maybe some of these kids are up against?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. I know you said in the urban setting, I mean, certainly we should always be taking this approach. And essentially, it's just like acknowledging, people, kids, teachers, parents, for me, also like administrators, sort of like just acknowledging and understanding their experiences so that we can sort of, the way I look at it is like deliver effective care. Like, I can't service a family well unless I'm like putting myself in their shoes and understanding what they go through. And it's the same with the teachers. The teachers like vicariously go through a lot of things through their students. They're and so being able to understand where that teacher comes from and how they service their students, that's where like I can come in as like trying to get them to understand and help each other. I mean, because we're urban, it's like I guess I would say most of our staff don't look like the kids in front of them. Like I would say most of our kids are of color. Um, and most of our staff seems to be white. And so that just that cultural difference and racial difference is important. And so like we really have to be able to understand where the families are coming from and the kids without putting judgments on like how they live or how they choose to spend their money or just all those kinds of things.
Right. So lots of times, like, we'll put our culture on other people, and then we think that our way is the right way to do
Oh
things.
yeah, I mean, white upper class America has got all the answers, right? So it's like, knowing that like I think we all think that we grow up thinking that like the way that we perceive and are growing up about what's important. And so we put that on everybody else. And that's just not how other cultures roll.
Right.
And so I think that's one of the biggest shocks. I mean, I work with a teacher who's like 23, from a suburb in Connecticut. I guess according to the world that we live in now, she's a fairly privileged kid, right? And so she's servicing, this inner city population. And at first she was just like, I don't understand what's happening. Like, just the fact that coming into school with like, no book bag, no pencils, no equipment for school. Whereas like, where we grew up, that was like fun to go pick out all dorky school supplies. And so it's just like a value that we have in like white middle class America that we impose on everybody else. And so it's kind of like bridging that gap to say like there's nothing wrong with them that they come to school this way. They don't, it's not valued perhaps. And
Or
that's
like,
that's
not
okay.
everybody is looking forward to back to school shopping,
Right.
and I'm going to date myself here and say that trapper keeper, right? And
Loved it.
like all that stuff, but we make it almost like, and sometimes I feel that in our culture we tend to feel bad, right? Like,
Yeah.
we come from a place of pity,
Yep.
like a place of pity, or that there's a less than mentality. But again, I think that a lot of times that's our personal beliefs, and they're not experiencing that. I mean, what is your thoughts on that, with like spending time with them?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think, we talk about this a little bit, Chris, is like, certainly when I came in, I mean, I'm 24 years into this job. I started at 21. And I definitely had, I always refer to it as that Messiah complex of like, I'm coming in to, I went to Springfield College and we were sort of trained up that way. Like, we're little soldiers there and we're coming in to save and better the world. Um, and so that was the lens I took. I started out in phys ed, and so I'm in a gym with I don't know, maybe 68 kids, and there's three of us teachers and there's balls flying everywhere. And so you're sort of like, how am I going to improve the world by doing this?
Right.
um and so it gets interesting. It's like, how do we connect with kids that you don't have um like a similar background to? And it really came down for me is just like building a relationship with them. And like I never thought I was a great teacher. Like, I mean, I knew my phys ed. I stayed in there for a couple years, and then I ended up we have this class that's called like social emotional behavioral class. And we had a classroom like of that in our school. And every day there was like a sub in that class because everyone thought the kids were like real bad. And so inevitably the kids would lock a teacher in a closet or something. And so by the middle of the day, they would come down, the principal would send them down to the gym for me to like watch them. And so I ended up just like talking to them and getting to know them and listening to them. And like, they're smarter than any staff I knew in the building. Like, they had it down, like they got it. They're
Yeah.
like, people are afraid of us. And so we're just going to like essentially fulfill that prophecy. And then
Wow.
they get what they want. They get to play basketball for 6 hours a day. So it
Right,
worked for
because
them.
that's the expectation. That's the
Yeah.
standard that they're held at. And I mean, years and years ago, when I mean we used to live a mile apart from each other, like I used
Mhm.
to go into your classroom and volunteer, and I used to see how you would be with them, and there was like this compassion and this mutual respect that, like, I noticed that perhaps not every person that came in contact with them like had. So you started off in physical education,
Yeah.
so you were a gym teacher, then you moved your way up until, because you didn't go right from being a gym teacher to behavior specialist. What did you
Yeah.
do in between?
Yeah, I was a special education teacher. And I would like to say probably not a good one. like I didn't know how to really teach anything. Like, the kids in front of me didn't know how to read. Um, I don't know how to teach reading. I wasn't trained in that. Luckily, I mean, this is where is like the teaching community is pretty amazing. Is like I had some veteran colleagues around me, and I had the relationship stuff down, and I was just sort of like, well, what am I supposed to do with them? Like, I have to have them do something. And so like I could go to them, and they were essentially teaching me how to teach them how to read while I'm doing this.
Right.
And then I have to go back to school and get a master's and whatever. And so I do that, but like it's just that on the job training. And I always sort of pitch as like, sometimes we have a hard time getting teachers. And for me, it matters. Like, you can be a great teacher. I mean, we had some teacher from Russia who was like this genius math person, and she lasted about 2 weeks, because it doesn't really matter how smart you are. It's like how you can present and make things interesting for kids to learn. And so it's more about your personality, more about how you connect with the kids than it is about what you do. Luckily, I've been trained well coming up through, to learn all those skills. But even now, sometimes I see our teachers teaching reading, and I'm like, I don't know how to do that.
Right.
So like I've pretty much gotten through this career on like my relationships with kids and families, and that's how
Well,
I'd
I
say.
think too, and I mean, not only because you're my sister, am I saying this, but I think too that it does take a certain person that can see them, the gifts in each and every one of these students, right? And like the light that they are, and like the innocence, that comes through them, and to be able to not hold them in a place of like you don't expect anything of them, but not see them, because a lot of these kids have a diagnosis, whether it's emotional, physical, mental, right, social, like they all have a diagnosis, but you don't put them in that box, right? You want to like speak into that a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, I just don't like, I don't really dig all the diagnosis stuff. Like, people love it, right? Staff love it, parents love it, everyone digs it. It's like, oh, you got ADHD, or you're depressed, or you're PTSD, and like, and then there's a magic pill that'll make you all better, and all that. And so that, I mean, there's a whole group of people that do well with that. And like, I just think it's really hard to see somebody as a diagnosis, right? Like, and that's where I guess I talk about that, like trauma informed stuff, is like beyond that diagnosis, there's a whole history and like a whole life that this kid has had, or his family has had. And so like I'm not so much interested that he's depressed, like, right, welcome to the world, we all are. It's kind of like, how, what can we do to help him access school better. And so like I don't care what he has, it's like, let's move past that. But people get real hung up on that. School systems love it. Like, the system of school as we know it is pretty broken. It probably hasn't changed all that much in 100 years.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, it's not great. I mean, it's government and state run, so that leaves it fairly ineffective. And so you're dealing with like, just groups of teachers trying their best to make it effective. And you don't, like, you learn how to teach reading, you learn how to teach math, and there's this whole element of this like social emotional stuff. Um that's really important, that like, we weren't taught. I wasn't taught one class in that in school. Like, no one taught me like what that looked like when someone's having a meltdown in your class, like what you do, when someone comes in and says they don't have access to food at night, or someone's getting beaten, like, you're not prepared for any of that kind of stuff. And that happens, as we know, urban, suburban, rural. But it's just pervasive for us. Like, we see it every day over and over again, and that affects our teachers. And I think that's where like my role comes in, is like being able to also, like, teachers are real isolated. Like, you can't even go to the bathroom as a teacher without, like, I bring my phone with me. Just, in case something happens. So like teachers are pretty isolated. They don't have anybody to really talk to about it. The administrators aren't really, I mean, I love them all, but they're not really available to deal with like the teachers' social emotional well-being. And so I think we're lucky in our district that we have this position, and I can be that bridge for teachers. A lot of times that's what I do, is I sit and listen to them cry, or like say their frustrations, and then we problem solve it. But to let them know, like, I get it, it's real stuff, like, and they're touched by it, they're traumatized by it themselves. Like, and that's what's hard for me, is like, I know we've chatted about it, is like during this whole pandemic, when everyone's remote, and like people dog on the teachers, right? Like, oh yeah, they just want to sit home. And like there's not a single teacher that I know that like prefers teaching remotely. Than like, we'd all want to be in front of our kids hugging them. And as you know, most of us have been to their houses, and like, you know, no one's sitting home chilling, like teaching school. Like
Right.
my cousin, you know, Jer's son, he teaches school, like they're back and forth, remote going, like, and they got a family. Like it's real hard for teachers to prioritize like this job and be home at the same time.
Yeah, and I know for you, like there's been times where we've been talking on the phone and you're out delivering computers to students, like knocking on doors, like taking the computers back, like if they're being repaired, like delivering different work to people, like handing out computers at school, like when this all started. And this is what I think the general public isn't aware of, or people that perhaps work in the suburban schools districts sometimes, you know, don't have to, or aren't the challenges as much with different things. And Sharon Schuster, who happens to be our cousin, is saying, which is just as important, if not more, than the teaching. Most of these kids are looking for someone who will spend time with them, you know,
Yeah.
is the emphasis. And then let's see, we had Brooke O'Neill. Hi, Brooke. She says, love you, Austins. Lynda, how does your understanding of the Enneagram shape how you do your job? So first of all, how would you describe the Enneagram to somebody that maybe perhaps isn't familiar with that?
Oh, geez, I wish I had my big resourceful book, because you know they do it real
I've
well.
only seen many books around here with the word Enneagram on it, and which is funny because we both study this in our line of work, so it cracks me up. Like here we are.
Yeah, I'm hook, line, and sinker. Brookie and Mimi and I, we like, you know, for me the Enneagram is the way to go. It's like, I guess for people that don't know, although I hate to say it, it's sort of like a personality, like, you know, Myers-Briggs kind of stuff.
Mhm.
It's sort of like 9 ways in which, I feel like a podcast that I listen to, 9 ways in which to see the world. And so there's 9 numbers, and one of them you primarily identify with. And each sort of number has some behaviors, motivations that go along with it. And it's really been like eye-opening for me. Like, I don't know, I would check it out if you can. There's some free tests out there, but pretty much like look for your motivations. And so everyone's motivated by certain things. And so like for us, my sister and I,
We're the same number.
right, we're what we call a 2. And so we're motivated by like the need to be loved. Like we want to be loved and accepted. And so that's our motivation for everything that we do. That's what we're looking for.
So if you're watching, that's what we want.
That's all we want, just to be accepted and loved. And you know, and so it's just really great. Like I find it really helpful when I work with staff. I kind of get on this obsessively. You're not supposed to guess people's numbers, but I do a lot, or I have them take the test. It's really helpful for me to understand what number someone is, and then I can like give them what they need a little bit better. Like I understand how they're motivated, I understand what they're looking at. So it's, I think in leadership, it's amazing. Like there's a pastor that I listen to, like his podcast and the church he's affiliated with, and he's all down with it. Like he's all in. Andy Stanley is his name, and he like, everyone in his company is aware of the Enneagram. Everybody, he knows everyone's number, and that's like being an effective leader. Like how can I talk to you, because everyone needs to be treated differently. And I think that's a problem with school, right? In general, is schools want to treat everybody the same. And like, if you want to be treated differently, you need an IEP. And I just don't think that like that shouldn't be the case,
Which
right?
for those
Everyone needs
watching, that
to be
means an individual educational plan,
right.
to where some kids, you know, and that's where it goes into like a diagnosis, right? With different things. But it's actually one of the biggest tools in leadership is the Enneagram, because even in the line of work I do, we use it for almost everything, and there's always like a version of it that's being recreated out there. So maybe what we'll do for everybody that's watching this is, I'm sure my sister knows the exact link, we can put it in the comments after the show, so that you can go on and take the test, because it's fun, like to have your family members do it. And we happen to be siblings and we're the exact same number, and that's not always the case, you
I'm
know,
pretty sure our dad is too.
yeah, like yeah, and like, you know, but it's interesting if you have your immediate family take it, your extended family, and you know, it's interesting, and then it has you learn a new way to be in relationship with people, and it's pretty amazing. So I'm glad you brought that up, Brooke, because that was a great question.
I mean, I
Did
also like to, Chris, I know you're reading the comments, is like, I think for me too, it's like helpful with kids. Like, I mean, my son could take the Enneagram test. He's 10. I mean, I had a suspicion of what he was, and of course he was all into it when I gave him the test. But it's really helpful for me because like I see the world through my lens, and like understand what my motivations are, but his motivations are completely different. And so in order for me to like parent him effectively, like I have to constantly, like sometimes when I don't know, I have to go get my little book and say, okay, I don't understand what a 5 is. I have to look this up again. And it really helps me. And I tell him that I'm like, it's helpful to understand your number
It
and
is.
to like, you know, if you know someone's this number, it's like your responsibility to sort of meet them where they're at. And so I think it's
Yeah,
helpful.
and I mean, and here's the cool thing about it is it's like anyone can take the test and anyone
Right.
can grasp it and anyone can do it. And it's funny because when we were playing soccer yesterday, I saw the complete difference and I was like, oh, there it is, you know, of your younger son too. And Todd Durheimer, that's our cousin. He is on here saying, I want to know my number. That was my Todd impression. I want to know my number. So we'll make sure we put the link down in there. Because it's cool. You'll love it, Todd. You'll totally dig it. You and Betsy will have a blast taking the test, and Derek. And
I have
but
some pretty good suspicions about what number perhaps Todd may be,
what do you
but
think
we'll
he is?
have him
You
take the
want to take a
test.
guess right now? So when he takes it,
He can, you take the test, Todd, and you let us know because I have a strong suspicion.
there you go. You have it. So let's see. So Danielle Goff. Hey Danielle. So she's a big part of what I do for a living. She says, "Hi Lynda. I have a son with behavioral problems and he has ADHD. He is 13 and he still throws fits sometimes. He has gotten better over time with that, but his dad and I keep going back and forth on whether we should put him back on the meds. What
Mm,
is your point of view on meds with that combination?" Great question, Daniel.
yeah. Well, I just want to say, like, I throw fits too, and I'm 46. So I, you know, I don't know. I think fits are pretty standard fare. I think it's hard because like, right, that's another cultural thing is like fits, we don't like when people do that. Like you have to be happy, fine, and good all the time, right? So, you know, and we have an age limit to that in our culture. Like once you're like, I don't know, 10, like I've heard people say to my kid, well, you're 10 now, like whatever, right? And like, you know, so fits are okay. Medications is great. You know, like I don't want to say I'm like pro medication or anti medication. Like if it's something that he's old enough, right? He'll know whether that gives him relief or not. Like if it feels like it helps him, then that's great. Like I think what's important is like we want to make sure that he doesn't rely on that to get through his day, right? Just like if it was like a glass of wine or you know whatever, is like he's in control of himself and like that is like an aid to help him perform better or you know feel better. I mean I go through this with my own son all the time, you know, do you take the medicine, do you not? And I always say to him is like, do you feel like it helps you? If you feel like it helps you, then let's do it, you know. So like I think meds are an important piece. Like we can't say I'm never doing meds. Like, you know, I think it's worth a shot, you know. I think the fits is really hard is like, you know, my biggest advice I think, and this is what I just do for a living is like I love fits. Like that's where I'm comfortable. I love when people have fits. I like I'm good in the meltdown. Like, you know, just be like I feel like typically in our culture we withdraw when people are freaking out or having a meltdown or whatever you want to call it. And for me it's like I like to be calmer and move closer to that. I mean my kids have fits all the time and it's like me being calm, you know, me saying that it's okay, like you have some big feelings and you got to release those. And we have this like term that I like to use is like co-regulating, right? It's like kids don't know how to regulate their emotions. And it cracks me up. I'm always in school and, you know, we're talking about a 6-year-old and they're like, well, he can't control himself. Nope, either can I. Like, you know, it's a really hard skill and kids will learn it through us. So like I like the word co-regulate. Like they're going to regulate based on if I'm regulating. If I'm calm and relaxed, they'll eventually get there. But it's not going to help if I'm jacked up and yelling at him.
And I think that's
So you know,
important
be there
because
with them in the moment
yeah, I
is
think it's important because sometimes, like as adults, we put our stuff on our children, or
right.
even like the children that we're in interaction with, right? So we bring our historical context with us everywhere we go, right? So like we bring our belief systems from when we were little, you know, what we were taught, what we thought was wrong or right, and as adults, we that shapes us, and then we pass that on, and then it becomes a generation, and then we even put it on to other people's children. And I think a lot of times it like, you know, I think it's our own stuff. And what you said is really important because I've been here and I've seen you say that. So for those of you, you've heard Lynda talk a little bit about her children, which are my nephews, and she has a 10-year-old son and a 6-year-old son, and the oldest son was diagnosed with ADHD, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so takes medication, and some days he doesn't, and he's freely talking. Like just yesterday, he's like,
Mm.
yeah, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes like it doesn't. I don't want to eat when I take it, but there's an open communication here, and there's not. I noticed like with him, there isn't a shame or an embarrassment, or it's not able to be talked about, because I've been around some people to where it's like on a down low, and it's almost like a shameful, or you can't talk about it, or sometimes kids don't even know they're taking medicine for
Yeah.
like something like that, so I noticed that, like how that operates here, and it's really cool, the open communication of it all,
Yeah, and
so,
I think it's important in school too, like to let kids know, like, so we're like a specialized special education program, and kids will literally start with us in kindergarten, and they're in like sixth grade, and someone's like, they realize for the first time that they're in a special class. And I'm like, so dude, you went from 6 years old to 10, 11, and you had no idea that you had any problems? Like, and I think it's like we try to shield kids from that. And I was like, well, what'd you think, that there's always 8 kids in a class? Like, it's like really important to let kids, I think, know what they struggle with. And like, I've had straight up conversations with 5-year-old kindergartners when they've just like went crazy around a room, and I can pull them out in the hall and be like, so what's your problem, dude? Like, and they usually know, like they usually can tell you in some language that they have. But usually, like, and this is where, I will pitch this all day long. Every kid I talk to, I do a lot of like observing. If teachers are struggling with a kid in a classroom and they want like some support or like ideas for what to do with the kid, I usually will say to the kid, like, so what's your deal? And their perception 95% of the time is that the teachers or the adults or someone doesn't like them. And so like that's and I mean, as an adult, you realize that that's the kid's perception, because the teacher's like, I love him, but they see the frustration, they see, or they've been labeled. And so kids always know, he doesn't like me, she doesn't like me, they think I'm bad. I
mm,
always say that. And like those are all the messages that adults give kids, and I'm sure all of us got some sort of message. And
sure.
so it's
I mean, I
really
remember
important.
growing up and thinking like, oh, those are the bad kids, like those are the behavior kids, those are the ones that throw fits, like Danielle said on here, like
Yeah.
that. And she says that, by the way, Danielle says, thank you, I don't think it has ever been put that way to me before. I never would have thought to ask him
Yeah.
personally about taking meds. So she appreciates that. And then we have Mimi O'Neill on here, who is your best friend in the whole wide world, and she is saying, hi Lynda, I can imagine it's hard not to bring your work home with you. How do you separate from the intense work you do during the day and relax at home? She cooks. No, I'm kidding. It's a joke here. My sister cooks nonstop all the time. I've never eaten so well in my life. But anyway, it is an important question. How do you separate that?
Yeah, it's hard. That's where my fits come into play, right? Like that's where my own meltdowns. It's really hard, and especially separating it from like my kids. But for me it's like, getting out in nature, like going for a walk, connecting, for me, connecting with God in some way, like, trying to find, things bigger than I am, to like work through it. But for me, getting outside and like connecting with nature and kind of looking for things that, or make me smile, or just little things like that. Of course, wine helps, is really nice too.
And it's red wine is the
Red
preference.
wine, any sort of red wine I'm down with.
Yeah.
And then it helps me too sometimes just to spend that time with my kids. Like things get crazy, it's hectic, it's all the systems for me are completely broken, school, DCF, like all the systems are broke. And so it like feels like super hopeless a lot. And then, you think about one kid maybe that you've been able to like help. And so that like keeps you doing it. I mean, there's certainly in the 24 years, there's been times where I'm like, I'm not going to care anymore. Like, I think I was just going through that, where it's just like, you got to shut it down, because it gets, super overwhelming, all the needs.
So what do you think, right? So 24 years, same district. You've seen kids grow up, grow out, move on. Like you've seen them working at the local, Stop and Shop, years down the road and things like that. And earlier you shared like, a teacher came in and was gone in like a couple months, stuff like that. Like, what do you think it is like with people like yourself that has you be there for 24 years? Because I know, because I've been, in your life, for almost 41 years. I know, right, the different challenges through the years and the ups and the downs and the frustrations, but what has you committed to this group of people? Because you could teach any kind of kids anywhere, anything, and you choose this. What do you think it is?
Yeah, I mean, I always say like, and I've tried to a couple times. I've been on a couple interviews at some kind of fancy suburban school system, which had a really nice gym and stuff like that. And I was like, I could work out after school, like, right. But like, it's just these kids, like, I feel like they need a voice, and like, I like to be a voice for them. Like, I'll fight for them. That's the way I look at, like, I couldn't work with any other population. Like, this is the only place I want to be.
Yeah.
And like, just sort of advocate for them, fight for them. Like, you know, I go as far as maybe a little bit much, like, protect them. Like, we get them in our program and we have them like protected from the world. Like, no one's going to be mean to them in our classrooms.
Mm.
And like, an ultimate thing for us is like, we want to include these kids, like, get them some skills they can learn to regulate and co-regulate, and sort of manage their emotions. And so the goal would be to sort of get into an inclusion class and then maybe come back to us for a little bit. And it's real hard for us sometimes to let them go, because we're like, if somebody messes with them, we will kill them.
Kidding, of course,
Basically.
figuratively.
Yes.
And I think it's important because love and nurturing and being taken care of is for sure what a lot of these kids in certain family environments need. Now, you spoke in earlier, since everything in 2020 and the pandemic and going virtual, so yeah, there's a whole conversation, right, of, oh, teachers have it easier, they're home and all of that stuff. And I know that it was a huge transition, for everything to go virtual. And like I said, I don't think people understand the thousands of computers that were handed out, or people that don't have Wi-Fi. The things that like we take for granted, because not everybody in the United States of America, believe it or not, everybody that's watching has like Wi-Fi and computers and like all of these things. And so I know for sure it was a challenge, with where you work and what you do. And then not only that, like you said, you support all of the teachers, you're also supporting all of the students, then you also are supporting the families, and then you are a single mother, right, of two boys who are also right now being homeschooled. So for all of the people that are watching, how in the hell does that get handled on a daily basis? I mean, I've seen little snippets of it and I'm like, man, like you're smooth like butter, right? And I watch the ease and the flow and I'm like, yeah, I don't know how she's really. And then like, I know our mom's watching, mom lives here, right? So you got mom, the two kids, like working all of that, and you handle it so effortlessly. So what have been some of the challenges with all of that? And what would you say to people that are watching that like are maybe being challenged by any of that?
Yeah, I mean, some days I just stink at my job. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's days when my kids are here, and they're on school, and like, I have a 6-year-old kindergartner, and so there's times where he needs like some help. And so for me, like, that's just like priority. Like, I usually, like, my job's a little bit more flexible. And so like, I pretty much stop what I'm doing and become mom, because that's the primary need. But like, I have that flexibility. Like, the teachers that are teaching in a class don't have that flexibility at all. Like, I'm not sure what they're doing with their kids, because I can't even imagine how that flows. But the challenge is finding the balance between work and being available for my kids. I mean, I also want them to know that like, I'm working too, like, and respect what I have to do,
Mhm.
and teach them that, that your needs aren't going to be met instantaneously. Um but like it's a challenge. I mean, but there's some amazing things like to watch I think my kids, their mom and I were so disappointed that like our 6-year-old was going to start kindergarten, remotely like this, but like to see how he does amazing. And it's great because we would never see it because they're sitting in school, right? And so like I see how he learns. Like I've learned more about these two kids since the pandemic started than I would ever have had before. I mean, that's where it's like, this blessing of like, wow, I really like I understand how Deegan learns. Like I see it. I watch him do it every day. I understand how Jake needs to like write things out and have me do things with him. So I think the challenge is sort of like I could just be zoned into them all day and watch them learn. And so sort of balancing work, setting boundaries is challenging for me in general. So for me in my job, like the teachers, once they're done with their day at 3:30, they want to debrief with me. And so like that's when my kids are done with school and we want to like play, go outside, go for a walk. And so it's sort of like the balance of like, so do I give the teachers another half hour of my time or do I give my kids, and some days I don't make the right choice or, somebody's upset with me and that those are challenges for me. Trying to balance it all
Right.
for sure.
And then what would you say? Because I know it's like, the whole debate and the controversy. And, I never shy from a debate or controversy because I believe in free flow conversation and I respect, people's opinions and stuff. But, what is your take on, because I don't know, again, I live in Florida, you're in Massachusetts. And how is it here as far as like kids going back to school? Because Florida, we're a little nuts. Kids are back in school. It's like, nothing's really
Yeah.
happening. And I know here that's not happening. But what is your take as far as for the safety of you, the safety of the kids, and what is your opinion on far as going back to school, like physically?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I guess I don't probably say this a lot, but I would say our district has done a really stand-up job as far as in our community. We haven't gone back at all. We've been fully remote this whole school year. Um, and I think we're in a good groove. I think, the kids get the Zoom and the links and like we're in a flow. And the surrounding communities have all done some sort of hybrid models or, they go to school for 2 weeks and then there's some outbreak and so then everyone's back home. And so like the transition I think would just kill our kids, particularly our kids with special needs. And so I feel like, this has made the most sense for us to, though, I'm ready to be in the classroom with them. Like I'm kind of over the Zoom relationship stuff. But like they're used to it. Like they flow better than we do. And I think it's just better to not have such a disruption or back and forth. I mean, we're gonna get ready to start going back probably in the spring. But our district's been smart. They've been slow. They've been cautious. I mean, we service a lot of kids, a lot of teachers, and so I think taking everybody into the account, they've done a really good job with that. I mean, staying home right now makes sense to me.
Right. Yeah, and it's all different demographically and opinions and things like that. But it seemed like y'all had a little bit more of a better regulation from where I live, with different things. Yeah, so we'll see like what comes with that and all that good stuff. So what would you say? So a couple times throughout this conversation, you've mentioned the system is broken, right? The system is broken. The system is broken, and you know, um, I mean, I used to be in educate. I was in education for 14 years. A lot of our families in education, like we've been around it in some way, shape, or form, like our whole life. So there might be some people on here going, are you just saying that where you are? Is it all schools? It's not my school, right? They might be saying all this stuff. So when you say like the system is broken and DCF, and all of that stuff, like what do you think needs to be implemented to totally transform our school system, like from a real, like, because being 24 years dealing with literally every story I think I've heard under the sun in situation, like honestly, what is it that you think? Because our American school systems does not have the best ratings in the world, right, compared to other countries. So what do you think it's going to take to like shift that mindset?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's just, and I don't know, and it's not just us, like we're a large urban district, but we grew up in a, I don't know what you call that community, maybe like middle class, suburban,
Middle upper class suburban.
sports oriented school. And I mean, looking back on that, like, and I just see our surrounding suburbs, people are like, oh, we don't live in the city, we moved to the suburbs because it's a better education. Yeah, I don't really see that. One of my friends, uh her kid goes to a suburban or rural school, and like, it hasn't seemed too impressive to me. Like, I guess you're just in a homogeneous community that looks like you, and so that works for them.
Yeah.
But I think about even my experience in school is like, I don't really do much. Like, like I didn't really do much work. Like, I just showed up and I smiled at everybody and I was nice and like, excelled in sports. And so like, I made it through. You made it through. I don't feel like there's a whole bunch of expectations. Like, anybody goes to college now, it's like, you can just go, or you just, whatever that dude that's in prison now that paid for their kids to go. So, right. I mean, if you got
Yeah,
money,
like
you
all
can
those
go.
celebrities like got in trouble, and
Yeah.
if you got the money, right? If you
Yeah.
got the money, anyone can go to college and you can get in. Like, and we have our own theories of like
Yeah.
breaks in between and stuff like that. But
Yeah. I
yeah,
just don't think that it's like, it's just watered down, like talked at information. I mean, I think we're moving towards collaborating, like, getting kids to research things on their own. Like, I know my kid loves to do that. Somebody tells him something like the RGB, like he was all about Ruth Bader, right? Like in
I
the
know.
put a seed in him, and then like she gave him 20 minutes to like research stuff online. But you got to be internally motivated to do that. Like, if that was me when I was 10, like I might find something else to do. And so I think that's what's hard is like, you know, a lot of us aren't really motivated to learn this stuff. It's like, it comes at you fast, you memorize it, you take it out on a test, and you move on to the next thing.
Well,
And
that's how we grew up for sure. Like
yeah, that's how we learn,
you
and it
study for the
hasn't changed
test.
that much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you study for the test. You want to go for the A's, and then it's like you are good if you get A's. You're bad
Yeah.
if you don't. And
So
then you have to figure something out in life. But I for sure I joke around about it all the time because and I mean the retention from high school. I don't remember anything.
yeah.
Right, like you learned it for like the test,
Yeah.
in different things, unless there was like a passion. But most people don't retain it. It's actually most people learn through experiential learning, right?
Right.
Like life experiences and adventure, and knowing how to do that. And we knew that because we grew up in sports, and I
Yeah.
played like an instrument,
Yeah.
and things like that. And through practice and embodying things,
Yeah.
that's how you really learn things.
Yeah. I
And
mean,
of course
if we
college is
get
going to fine tune those tools and that education, and all that stuff. So,
like if we could get
if
kids
you were to really
outside every
sum it
day.
up, then like, what would you say would be the ultimate change to transform the school system?
Yeah, I mean, we got to get kids outside, like get them where things are actually happening, make it practical, like, I mean, that's where you see these kids, like, I mean, we barely, everything's just so dictated, is like, oh, we have to get them 20, like literally kids are playing outside for 12 minutes. Like you got 12 minutes of recess. And it's kind of like, and I was a math teacher, and like I was used to get so frustrated because like I mean, right, all teachers know is like you got this amount of time to teach this skill. So if I'm teaching fractions to a bunch of sixth graders, so I got 6 weeks to teach fractions. Whether everybody knows it and or not, we're moving on in 6 weeks. And that just like, and so you're just always like trying to catch up because they didn't get it, or I did a crappy job teaching it. I mean, there was days when I'd be like, I don't really know what I'm doing today. Like, you're trying to figure out the best way that they're going to learn something, and you think you got a great lesson, and then it doesn't resonate with them.
Yeah.
So all these time limits, like I literally got an email today that went out to the whole staff. It was like, send me, how did it go? This is probably terrible, right? But send me your log of all the positive phone calls that you've made to parents. Who's ever got the most positive phone calls will get a gift card to Home Depot.
Wow.
And I just was like scratching my head looking at it. I was like, for real? Like, there just seems like something globally wrong with that for me. And it's like, I don't know. Is like that we have to tell people to make positive phone calls home is concerning. But like I'm sure that was like that 50 years ago. I'm sure our teachers, who was there, Miss Haber, I'm sure she had to keep a log of,
Miss
how
Haber.
how
She's
many phone
social
calls
studies.
she
It
made.
came to me now. Mrs. Hughes was my math teacher.
Right.
Mrs. Haber was my social studies. And I love that you're on here, Mrs. Haber, watching this because don't worry, Mrs. Haber, I remember some things from the US history you taught me. It wasn't all a waste. So I do remember some, but yeah, I'm sure, back in the day too. And but I want to say that too, because even having Mrs. Haber, I'm still gonna always call you Mrs. Haber, right? Like on here, like even when I had COVID, I got a card in the mail from my kindergarten teacher. I
Mm,
was like, see, these are teachers, right? Like here I am, I'm going to be 41 years old in a few weeks, right? And like I have my fourth grade teacher, my kindergarten teacher, like still in communication with me today, and because they care or they wouldn't be here,
yeah.
like watching that. And I always like, because that's the kind of teacher that you are too. And I tend to feel that like some of the old school teachers were that way, like
Yeah.
really cared about people, and the
Yeah.
kids and the families and stuff like that.
And,
So
and it's hard, I think, and not that we want to downplay it to our kid, but our district just got some report cards. And I think as parents, we might just be overly cautious. Is like, for me, I was kind of like, um, I don't know. I just feel like the grades weren't really important. And like, it's never, he's in fourth grade. So we've never really, I don't think we didn't show him the first 3 years of school because, he's like a little bit of a perfectionist. He'd be crushed if he, somehow he thinks he needs to be perfect. So it was good. I mean, we got report cards and I was kind of like, cool. All I'm really interested is in these like effort grades, or like, I don't know what you call them, where you get like a 4 that you're amazing, a 3 you could try hard, some sort of rubric on your effort and your work study skills. I'm like, that's kind of like what we're looking at,
yeah,
is like your A and B is cool, but like it's more about how like how you're getting there. And so sometimes
those
for me,
were
I
my
was,
favorite college courses in college, man. I got complete or incomplete. I was like,
yeah,
yes, I
yeah.
completed.
But I think like, that's, for me, it's another like sort of American school system sort of, issue, is like we want, kids expect to get A's, parents expect their kids to get A's. We're forever in this push to do what do you call those classes? Oh, Mimi and Brooke will know, like, accelerated class or
Like
something
the
like
like
that.
college prep,
AP.
like kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
AP something or other. Like,
Yeah.
you got to look good, and so you got to have AP class, and you got to get an A in that class, or you're not going to be anybody. And it's like, we have people graduating from college, and they like can't sort out how to like fix the basic necessities when their car breaks down. So you
Right.
got 3 master's degrees and you don't know nothing. I mean, essentially, that's the way I look at it. It's like, so something is wrong with our, like with us, when like we can't do basic things. We're hiring people to mow our lawns because like we don't know how to work the lawnmower, or whatever. I don't know. It's like, we're not getting like, so if we had some things that were like really skill related, I think that would be more helpful. I mean, we grew up in that era. I can remember in middle school being able to have access to like, what did they call it then, like shop class, like,
Yeah, technology, music.
woodworking, or
We did it all. Yeah.
we made some like saw that had like serious teeth in it, and like had a leather strap on. Like, it was
It was
cool.
called a survival straw.
Yeah. And
Oh,
like nowadays, like like people, like anytime people see, I mean, I guess it's political, but like anytime people see like a weapon, the world shuts down. Is like, we can't be making, saws in school. They'll kill each other. Yeah, because that's
oh
kind of the culture we've made it.
yeah. And
Kids
I
are
mean, if
around
you think
guns and
about it,
sticks and knives all day long. They're
yeah.
like,
I
they'll
talk
have
about that
justice.
all the time. I'm like, we used drills, hammers, nails, walked around with saws, was showing it off to everyone. They gave us sewing machines, even though I sewed my pocket together.
Yes, I did too.
I
Yeah.
thought it was great, but like all of that is gone now.
Our
Francine is
kids, I just, just so you know, Chris, like in our district, because like I feel like sometimes our kids may be perceived as like being like below grade level or whatever. Some of our kids get no specials. Like, there's no art hardly ever. There's no music. They rarely have gym or phys ed. It's like once or twice a week. Like your special is you get to go to our state test prepping, MCAS prep class. So that's what you get to go to for a special, is like go have fun in test prep. And
And
so
like
it's like,
even gym class, right? I mean, like, I mean,
yeah,
you and I, we used to love gym class and stuff
yeah.
like that, but I love shop. I love music. I love,
Mhm.
there was like a home ec, like I like learned to cook. I still have a recipe for my home ec class
Yep.
that I'll make, right? Like like years later. And Francine's on here. I don't know what you're saying, Francine. AAA is my basic thing. I don't even know what she's saying. I don't know what that means.
She has expectations for all A's.
Oh, A's, yes, because she thrives for Francine was a very academic individual, so
Yeah.
she's all about A's. Oh, Michelle Gamble, you remember Michelle?
Yeah.
Michelle,
Yeah.
yeah, she's on here saying hi. Francine saying I hated shop class, and then she's laughing at us about home economics and
Yeah.
all of that stuff. Michelle Gamble is saying home economics was the best. Todd Durheimer is saying they need to be taught life skills.
Yeah. Exactly. And
Francine
and
saying
that,
I cooked at home ec and shop, but I loved making my parents a gift. And Todd
yeah,
is saying no classes to express yourself.
exactly. Or just like, and I know there's cultural differences now and stuff like that, but like, there was no talk of the election because like these teachers are on a schedule, right? Like they got to teach, whatever skills, and they got this amount of time. So like barely talk of the election, barely talk of like COVID. And that's why I love my job, is because like the teachers can do all that. I get these kids for 45 minutes. I do like a group with them, and I'll be like, so tell me about like who in your life has COVID. And like every single one of the kids in our classes have been touched by someone that they know that has COVID in some dramatic story. But like there's no space for them to be human in school, because it's like learn this, do this. So no one's talking about what's real, like what's really going on. It's because there's such
Well, and
timeline.
we talk about that all the time, right? That it was like, you just went and did that, but like then the real talk of what's like going on, internally. And I know like for you and other kids, like it's scary,
Yeah.
and it all depends on the age brackets. But you said even, your own personal children, they associated if somebody got COVID with death. So we even had to be careful, like when I got it, to make sure, because they didn't want to think that their auntie was gonna like
Yeah.
die,
Yeah.
because I wasn't going anywhere. I was committed to that, but like, but it's a scary thing, and unfortunately a lot of these people have lost somebody,
Yep. For sure.
to this. But I do think it's important as far as like transforming the schools, and like what you're saying, like the life skills have been taken away, the academic pressure, the expectations,
Yeah.
go right to college. Like you and I are a firm believer about that gap year, right? Like
Yeah.
I know we can speak that out loud, like because we're like, man, we wish we would have taken like a year or two to like before you go and make those choices. You figure a lot out
Yeah.
in those first 2 years, and there was an expectation there, or what we thought we were supposed to do society. And I blew that up years ago, still do every day of my life,
Yeah.
because I broke through that caring what other people think, in the expectations. But I do think it's important, and so often too that there's this I know we only have a few minutes left, but there's this standard in American education to where you have to meet these certain marks in order to pass a grade, right?
Yeah.
So like starting at a very, because when I worked in education, it would start at 2 years old. I would have to test 2 year olds to
Yeah.
make sure that they were able to move up to the next classroom, right? So you have to have these basic fundamental skills in order to go on. So then you have these conversations, right, as teachers and educators, like, oh, I think your kid needs to stay back or repeat the first grade, or
Yeah.
do kindergarten twice, or something like that. And then like there's even shame around that culturally. Like if you get held back, at least there used to be, I don't know so much, or if people are performing up to age appropriate, like you were saying, like who
Yeah.
cares if somebody throws a fit at 10, you throw one at 46. So
Frequently. Yeah.
so like
Frequently.
the age appropriate, and it's always an interesting conversation of like age appropriate in fundamentals. You know what I mean? So like what is your thought on that as far as like
Well, that's where like I think we're talking about like that's where things need to be more standards based and not like, grade level stuff. It's kind of like, can you do this skill? And if you can, you move on. And if you can't, like, we're going to get you so that you can, and not just move on. Like, that's what happens. And why so many kids are left behind is like, they're moving on regardless. So that kind of standards based approach of like what the skill is and whether you master it or not, particularly in the younger years, I get as you get older, high school age, like that's difficult to do. But like in these like K to 5 years, like that standards based learning would be like, I think really, really helpful. And kids know, like they know when they can't read. Like, I got a fourth grader, he can't read at all. And he's like, I'm 9 and I don't know how to read. And so he's like behind the ball to start, like, it's going to be really hard for him in our school system to catch up ever. Because we're never teaching him how to read now, we're teaching him how to survive, right? So like he recognizes some words, he can't sound anything out. And so it's like band-aids on bullet wounds. That's my famous saying to everything in a school system, is like, we just put band-aids on gaping bullet wounds all day long, and that everyone's doing the best they can. I mean, I work with great people. It's just like, it's not set up to like super succeed, especially if you're a kid of color in an urban setting, and I'm sure, I just don't have the experience of a suburban school, but I'm sure it's the same there. There's kids getting left behind there as well. And as we know, if you're not the top athlete, if you're not the coolest kid, then you're a nobody. Like, none of that has changed. If not, it's gotten worse. I mean, the
Yeah, I
way I
mean,
see it now.
our experience is that like we grew up in the white suburban school, and my experience of diversity was going to college. And
Yep.
it was a moment where I was like, wow, these people don't look like me. And there was an understanding of like a judgment, right? If I look back, like years ago, I was judging other people's cultures. I was judging other people based on so many things,
Yeah.
and then like, even like with my sexuality, I know what that's like to be judged or not, not accepted in all of that stuff. And so even seeing the shift in that in schools of kids being able to fully self-express, right? Like with who their authentic self is, whether you are that athlete, whether you are that art kid, that drama kid. And you're right, because I think back on that even growing up, like, I always took pride that I had friends in every little group. Like that was just me. And I played in band, I did sports. But if you're not that athlete, if you're not that artist, that Broadway, drama kid, or something along those lines, I think you truly do get lost. And
You're nobody, and you'll feel like one, and the system's designed set up like that, right? Like, and I think what's hard is like, usually kids are okay with other kids, it's the adults that have the problem. I mean, we got some kids that represent themselves a little bit differently, and the other kids are kind of like whatever, they don't care. I think about my own kids, they don't care how people dress, or it's the adults around them that have the problems. So
right,
like,
that
what
they
are the
need
problems?
those fancy things or those name
Yeah.
brand clothes or stuff like that. And we have Sharon is saying, we need some current events for sure. Like, we don't really talk about that anymore. Aunt Jer is saying, awesome discussions, thanks, I'm glad you and Uncle Bill were watching tonight. Mom's saying, so proud of my amazing daughters, she lives for those moments.
And she's sitting in a chair in the living
She's
room.
sitting in the chair upstairs. We're all in the same house. It's funny. And then Francine is saying, I think it's important for kids to understand money and how to manage it. And art and music and physical education should not be cut.
And
It,
Franny, think about that. You guys go to a store, right? Like, I love this. And you ever, like, no one really uses cash anymore, but you give somebody like 10.05, $10.05. Like, anybody under the age of 30 has no idea how to sort that out. Like, they're like, I don't know what you want me to give. I'm like, just give me 90 cents, or what, like, whatever. Like, they have no idea how to sort that out. And that's just because, like, we don't really teach that anymore, because we're teaching something different now.
right, and let's
Like,
be real. Most people today, you give them cash and they're like,
what?
they actually give you a look. If you give them cash, they're like,
Yeah.
dude, like, what am I supposed to do?
Basic stuff we don't
You're not Apple paying,
know.
you know? Like,
Yeah, and I wondered, like, and I think about like Todd and Betsy, and like their kid did school abroad. And so, although I think it was mostly on maybe some military bases, right? But like the rest of the world doesn't operate like we are. I mean, we were trying to figure out the other night, Chris was cooking with me, and it was like, some backwards recipe that I had on Pinterest, and it was like 5 grams of something, and I was like, I don't understand what that means.
Yeah,
We
so
have
Lynda's
no
like, I don't know
idea.
what that means. And I go, I don't either. I'm like, hey Siri, how many grams equal a certain like whatever? And I was like, if
How many
Siri,
tablespoons is a gram?
yeah. And I was like, why don't I know this? And then Linda's like, because we're the only ones that don't use the damn metric
We
system.
don't use the metric system.
And I
Yeah.
was like, but I was like, that
And I
was
bet
stuff
you
like you
Derek
learn.
knows the metric system.
Yeah, but you learn that stuff in third grade, and I'm like, I don't know how many grams are in a like whatever
Yeah.
it was, So
I couldn't even conceptualize what a gram looked like. That's how bad it was.
yeah,
Of course, we
so
did have a glass of wine, but that's all right.
yeah, so I mean, there's so much, right? Like in the schools and education and kids and all of that stuff. Sharon says, "Great job, ladies. Looking forward to Austin's part two." Uh-oh, I think it's going to become an Austin series. Watch out.
Very.
Joyce, hey Joyce, I'm proud to know you too. You are so wise. Betsy said, "The clock, the time. No one knows how to tell time anymore."
No,
That's
that's
true.
true.
That's so
Yes.
true.
Because you just look at your cell phone and it says 8:03.
Yeah,
Like
or you'll be like,
whatever.
"Hey Siri, hey Alexa, what
Yeah.
time is it?" And it tells it. But it's so true. Like I'm looking at you have a clock because when I got here, I was like, "Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, she has an old school clock on her wall." But you're so right, Betsy, that kids don't know Roman numerals anymore,
Yeah.
and they don't know how to read just like a regular clock that's on the wall. So
That, and
that's
I would
huge.
say, Chris, and I'll pump this, like there has to be some sort of like spirituality class, like some sort of introduction to like whatever you want to call it, like and I know it's probably not politically correct, but like God, whatever people want to call it, higher power, something, spirit, I think people call, like some sort of understanding of like there's something bigger than you, like.
Absolutely. I mean, it's kind of funny because we both work in that domain too, in like certain
Yeah.
ways. But I mean, I think that too. That there's the foundation. Whether it is because I mean that's a lot of my work. Whether people call it God, Jesus, Buddha, Krishna, Allah.
Yeah.
The moon, the sun, the stars. There's something bigger than you, that you have a purpose. And I think that so many times in life people haven't found their purpose, or they have their purpose and their passion that they're passionate about, but they let all of these limiting beliefs from when they're younger
Yeah.
stop them
Yeah.
from having it. And so I think that we have gotten disconnected from like nature, spirit, like all of that stuff too, that whatever it is that
And
guides
being
you.
able to point that out to kids, like I say to my kids all the time, I drag them outside. Look at the moon, look at those stars. Try to tell me there's no God when you see something like that. When you go for a hike and you look out and you see, the landscape, you're like, how are you saying, like, how can you say that there's no God
Something
involved in
not
this?
bigger than you, like whatever it is, whatever
Whatever it is, yeah.
denomination or whatever you believe in, and
Yeah.
of course there are going to be people watching here that are not going to have that, and that's cool. I'll listen to you and talk to you too, because that's how I roll. We'll have coffee and we'll talk about that. But
I might not, but
I will, because I'm more open to different things like
I
that.
might be over that.
I mean, I gotta tell everyone this is funny, and there's a lot of our family members that are on here watching. Hey Emily, great to see you. Remember Emily? She's on here saying hi. She's saying she's saying she's answering for us. She's saying it's easy. A gram of sugar is like one sugar cube.
Oh, well, thank you. That's
Thanks,
helpful.
Emily. That supports us. And then Mrs. Haber, I'm impressed with your knowledge of education. Mrs. Haber, fourth grade teacher right there. So thank you. Um, but I do want to say, because this is kind of funny, because we do have to wrap it up. We're about 3 minutes over, but and thank you all for hanging out. But I want to say this because it was really funny, right? Because I was like, "Hey, Lynda, why don't you be on my show next week?" She goes, "Oh, I don't know if I'm like that positive." She's like, "I don't know if I'm that positive, or if I really
Hopeful.
got much to say." And I go, "You have a lot to say." I said, I think it would be great for you to be on my show. So make sure you press those likes and those hearts if you've appreciated this conversation, or if it's supported it in any way, shape, or form. But I think they're wanting a part two at some point. It might be cool at one point to come on here and talk all about the Enneagram. Maybe we could bring Mimi on as
Yeah,
another
Mimi
guest
Boogie.
to talk about the Enneagram, and we can have the Mimi, Lynda, and Chris show as far as the Enneagram goes and stuff like that. So we'll have to look into that. So I want to say thank you, because I know this is out of your comfort zone. First of all, to be on social media.
Yeah, I
Number
was
one.
gonna say I don't see any hearts or likes, but I don't think I'm just looking at a Zoom call, right?
Yeah. So you'll learn this about my sister. She doesn't do social media. So she's looking for the hearts and likes in a Zoom meeting. She doesn't get it.
I don't know.
So
I don't
you
have a
won't
Facebook
find her
page.
on Facebook because it doesn't exist. She's not really on she only is on Instagram to like read articles. She's that kind of person. So she has no Facebook, no Instagram to drop on here, no donations. I think if anything, you just want people to go out and what? Be kind and make a difference with kids, or
Yeah.
like what would be your last thing you would want to say to people?
Yeah, like dig below the surface a little bit. Like don't look at what you're just getting. Like somebody's deeper than that. Like look past the meltdown.
All right, maybe that should be a t-shirt. Look past the meltdown. So stay tuned. So I'm glad that you tuned in tonight. Those of you that this is my sister and you got to know her, and she does amazing work all of the time. And so I'm so glad that you were able to get on here tonight and step out of your box. People are saying I need that test. So what I'm gonna make sure, Todd's saying old fashioned, Lynda. So I'm gonna make sure, because Lynda has about 10,000 books on the Enneagram, and I use it in my work all of the time. We're going to make sure we put that website. I'll put it in the comments down here so you can all click on it and take that test, because it's going to be a blast, and you'll have a lot of fun with it. And stay tuned. You never know. She might be on another episode, because this has been a very popular episode, Lynda. See, and you didn't even
Yeah,
think you'd have
right.
much to say to people. So
Todd, text us your Enneagram number.
that's right. So I want to thank everyone for tuning in tonight, because it supports me. And if there's any way that you want to support me and having this happen and making a difference, it's always a support if you share it to your social media pages. That's always the best way that you can support me. And it's really just to make sure that we're making a difference and we're spreading kindness, and that we're always coming from a place of compassion, and seeing the good in people even when we don't want to. There's amazing people out there, so it supports me and you operating with compassion. That's what I ask people to do, and to get to know people that maybe you're not so familiar with, and ask questions, and learn from different people, because diversity is where really makes our country and our world a special place. So I stand behind that, and I really appreciate all your support in coming out here tonight and watching the show. And you can stay tuned for next week. I will announce this week on who my guest will be next week and the topic on that. Same time, 7 p.m. on my Facebook page. And I thank you all for joining, and have a great night. Take care. Good night.